My brothers and sisters, when we speak of Iran, many immediately think of politics, sectarianism, sanctions, or war. But very few pause and ask, what is the meaning of Iran in the bigger picture? What is its role in the divine script of history that Allah has authored from the beginning of time? The Qur'an may not mention the word Iran by name, but the echoes of Persia, the region, its people, and its unfolding journey are certainly present. If we read with depth, with spiritual insight rather than just surface knowledge, we begin to see patterns. And patterns, my beloved brothers and sisters, are never random with Allah. They are always deliberate. Let us begin with something many overlook. In Surah Ar-Rum, Allah says, "The Romans have been defeated in the lowest land, but they, after their defeat, will overcome." Within 3 to 9 years, the command is with Allah, before and after, and on that day, the believers will rejoice. Now ask yourself, why does Allah tell us about this specific historical event between the Romans and the Persians? What's the deeper wisdom? You see, this wasn't just a political war. It was a war between two worldviews. One side represented the last remnants of monotheism in the Roman Empire, and the other side was the mighty Persian Empire, still clinging to its Zoroastrian fire worship. The Muslims at the time felt spiritually closer to the Romans, not politically, but theologically, because at least they had some link to Tawheed. So when the Persians defeated the Romans, it was like darkness defeating a faint glimmer of light. The believers felt disheartened. And Allah revealed these verses not just as prediction, but as consolation, a reminder that defeat is temporary and that the destiny of nations is in the hands of Allah. And what happened? Within the foretold time, the Romans defeated the Persians just as Allah had said. But here's what we often forget. Both empires were eventually dismantled. Neither stood the test of time. Why? Because their moral foundation was weak. Their civilizations were grand, yes, but greatness in the sight of Allah isn't about tall towers or strong armies. It is about truth, justice, tawheed, and humility before the Creator. And it was precisely in the heart of Persia, yes, modern-day Iran, that Islam would soon arrive. Think about that. Just after this verse was revealed, the Prophet Muhammad began sending letters to the emperors, one to Heraclius, another to the Persian king Khosrow. Heraclius hesitated, but he respected the Prophet. Khosrow, he tore the letter apart. He rejected not just a man, but a message from the Lord of the worlds. And what happened? His empire fell. His own governors turned against him. His family was destroyed. And eventually, Islam entered Persia. The people embraced the light that had once been rejected by their ruler. Subhanallah, the rejection of a tyrant cannot stop the guidance of Allah. It may delay it, it may fight it. So my brothers and sisters, do you see now how Iran's history is intertwined with the Qur'an? Not by name, but by destiny. The fall of the Persian Empire is not just a historical fact. It is a lesson. It shows how Allah removes the arrogant and replaces them with the humble. How He breaks the mighty and lifts the sincere. Persia, or what we now call Iran, went from being an enemy of the early Muslims to becoming a fountain of knowledge in the Islamic Golden Age. Many of our scholars, our hadith collectors, philosophers, and spiritual teachers came from that region. From the very soil that once tried to destroy Islam, Allah brought forth some of Islam's greatest defenders. That, my friends, is divine irony, and it is beautiful. But something changed. Over time, Iran's spiritual identity began to fragment again. Political power, nationalism, sectarianism, it crept in. And once again, we are witnessing a country caught between its glorious Islamic past and a chaotic political present. But don't let the headlines fool you. Don't let the propaganda from the East or the West blind you to the real story. Iran's journey is not yet over. Allah is not finished with Iran. He never is finished with any nation until their book is closed. And until then, every rise and every fall is a message, not just to them, but to all of us. Because the Qur'an wasn't revealed for spectators. It was revealed for participants. It is asking, what kind of people will you be when Allah tests your nation the way He tested theirs? So yes, Iran's destiny is being written, but it was never in the hands of America, Israel, the United Nations, or even its own rulers. It has always been and will always be in the hands of Allah. And that should humble us. It should shake us awake. Because if He can turn Persia from fire worship to faith, from arrogance to humility, then what about us? Are we prepared to change? Are we prepared to rise before we fall? The destiny of Iran is not just Iran's story. It is a reflection of our own Ummah's mirror. And the Qur'an is asking, will you see yourself in it? Or will you wait until the next empire falls to finally open your eyes? My beloved brothers and sisters, history has a rhythm, a pulse. Nations rise and nations fall. Civilizations build, then collapse. Empires dominate and then they fade into memory. This is not just a political cycle, it is a divine law. And Allah reminds us in the Qur'an repeatedly, say, travel through the land and see what was the end of those before you. Surah Ar-Rum. These are not bedtime stories. These are warnings for the awake. Now think about Iran. Once the proud heart of the mighty Persian Empire, a civilization so sophisticated, so advanced, so sure of its strength that even the Roman Empire feared it. Its palaces were grand, its cities full of poetry, science, philosophy. But today, what do we see? Sanctions. Isolation. Isolation by the world. People queuing for bread, struggling under inflation, caught in the middle of global pressure and internal control. Many ask, why? But the better question is, what is Allah doing with Iran? Because, my dear brothers and sisters, not every hardship is a punishment, and not every success is a reward. The Quran flips our assumptions. Allah tells us, and we will surely test you with something of fear, hunger, and loss of wealth and lives and fruits, but give glad tidings to the patient. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:15-5. Do you see? The trial itself is not the problem. The response to the trial is what determines the outcome. So what if Iran's current condition is not a curse, but a cleansing? What if this long period of hardship, siege, and suffering is not a rejection, but a preparation? A preparation for something greater. Because Allah does not build greatness on ease. He builds it on struggle. Look at the Prophet Makkah. He could have been a king in Makkah if he just agreed to compromise. But instead, he chose exile, boycott, ridicule, and finally hijrah. Why? Because Allah was teaching us, only those who endure fire are worthy of carrying light. Iran today is under fire, a nation being economically suffocated, politically cornered, spiritually divided. And whether you love its leadership or oppose it, whether you agree with its ideology or not, the Quranic lens compels us to go deeper. Allah may use a people, even those flawed, to deliver a bigger message to the world. Because remember, Allah used Fir'aun to prove His power. He used Namrud to expose the arrogance of false gods. He even used Abu Jahl to increase the reward of the Prophet. So what if Allah is using Iran not because it is perfect, but because it is positioned in a way that makes its pain a mirror to the Ummah? Because, my dear brothers and sisters, Iran is not the only one suffering. Look around. The Ummah is bleeding in Syria, Palestine, Yemen, Sudan, Kashmir. But unlike many, Iran has refused to bow. Whether you interpret that as wisdom or stubbornness, the Quranic principle remains. Those who stand in hardship are being shaped. The Quran says, do the people think they will be left to say, we believe, without being tested? Surah Al-Ankabut. The answer is no. Everyone is tested. Individuals, families, and even nations. And here's something even more profound. Sometimes Allah tests a nation through victory and sometimes through pressure. When a country becomes rich, powerful, and admired, that too is a test. Will they become arrogant? Will they oppress others? Will they forget Allah? And when a nation is crushed, demonized, isolated, that's another test. Will they turn to Allah sincerely? Will they cleanse themselves of corruption? Will they rise with purity? We cannot judge from the outside, but we can reflect inward. You see, Iran's current condition forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What do we do when the world turns against us? What do we do when even our fellow Muslims misunderstand us? What do we do when standing firm costs everything? Trade, comfort, even food on the table. These are not Iranian questions. These are Ummah questions. Because what is happening to Iran now could happen to any Muslim nation, and for many, it already has. So instead of just watching, criticizing, or debating, perhaps the better response is to learn, to observe, to prepare. Because if this is how Allah purifies a nation, what happens when it's our turn? Are we ready to handle pressure without breaking? Are we willing to endure loss without losing faith? Iran is a mirror, and the reflection shows us that the time of ease has ended. Now begins the time of trials. But don't fear that, because the Quran never promised us ease. It promised us truth and guidance and hope if we remain patient. My beloved brothers and sisters, the Ummah today does not need more spectators. It needs people who understand that trials are not curses, they are callings. And the destiny of Iran, written by Allah, may just be a wake-up call for the rest of us. A call to reconnect with Him before it is our turn to be tested. So reflect before you regret, and prepare before you are placed in the same fire. For the fire is not meant to destroy, but to reveal who truly carries the light. My dear brothers and sisters, one of the most painful wounds in our Ummah today is not the oppression from outside, it is the division from within. And nowhere is this more visible, more deeply rooted, and more tragically misunderstood than in the divide between Sunni and Shia. A divide that many associate with Iran. But before we rush to blame or defend, before we raise flags and slogans, let us pause and ask, what does the Qur'an say about such divisions? What light does Allah provide in the midst of this darkness that we as an Ummah have created for ourselves? Allah says clearly in Surah Al-Imran, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether, and do not become divided. And remember the favor of Allah upon you when you were enemies, and He brought your hearts together, and you became by His favor brothers. This is not a suggestion, it's a command. It's not about ignoring differences, it's about not letting those differences destroy the fabric of unity that Allah Himself wove for this Ummah. But what happened? Over time, history was stained with politics, betrayal, hurt, and misunderstandings. Some genuine, some exaggerated, and some completely fabricated. And yes, Iran today stands as a symbol of Shia identity in the modern world. But should that automatically make it the enemy of every Sunni? Is that how the Quran taught us to think? Let's be real. Most people who passionately hate the other sect have never read the original sources, never sat with scholars from both sides, and never deeply understood the context. They inherited hatred like a family heirloom, passed down without question. And this is dangerous, Because when hatred becomes inherited, it becomes immune to logic, to compassion, even to revelation. The truth is, the division between Sunni and Shia was never about beliefs alone. It was shaped by power. Who would lead? Who would rule? Who would control? And where politics starts, Shaitan celebrates. Because he knows once Muslims are divided, they become weak. And when they are weak, they are easily conquered. Now ask yourself, who benefits from this divide today? Is it the average Muslim in Iran? Or the villager in Pakistan? Or the shopkeeper in Iraq? No. It is the global powers who fear Muslim unity. It is those who want to keep the Ummah fragmented, so they fund one group, arm another, and feed both with fear. We've forgotten that Allah warned us in Surah Al-Anfal, do not dispute and thus lose courage and your strength would depart. 8:46. When we argue, we weaken. When we divide, we collapse. And Iran, with all its flaws and complexities, is not the cause of this divide. It is one manifestation of it. The problem is not Iran. The problem is the hearts of the Ummah, how easily we allow labels to erase humanity, and how quickly we forget the Qur'an's call to brotherhood. You know, one of the most profound moments in the life of the Prophet was not a battle, it was reconciliation. When the Ansar and the Muhajirun, two very different groups, came together for Allah, when tribes that had fought for generations embraced one another under the banner of Islam. That was the miracle. Not just the conquest of cities, but the conquest of hearts. We often ask, where are the miracles today? Why aren't we seeing the help of Allah descend? Maybe the help is waiting for us to clean our hearts, waiting for us to see beyond labels, waiting for us to look at an Iranian not as a Shia, not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as a soul created by Allah, judged by Allah, and tested in ways we may never understand. This doesn't mean we ignore differences, of course not. The Prophet engaged in dialogue, debated with clarity and corrected deviations with wisdom. But he never mocked, never generalized, and never allowed disagreement to become hatred. And today we have reversed that. We don't debate, we attack. We don't clarify, we cancel. We don't engage, we assume. And in doing so, we lose more than unity, we lose barakah. Our prayers become dry, our hearts become heavy, our ummah becomes lost. Why? Because as long as we are busy fighting each other, we forget the real enemy, the one who wants to erase Islam altogether. So, my beloved brothers and sisters, we must rise above the traps of sectarianism, not by pretending that differences don't exist, but by refusing to let them destroy our dignity. Iran may be Shia majority, so what? The Qur'an does not say only the Sunni Ummah is one body. It says, indeed this Ummah of yours is one Ummah, and I am your Lord, so worship me. Surah Al-Anbiya. That is the call, that is the standard. And if we do not answer it, we will remain weak, divided, and easy prey for every oppressor that seeks to exploit our disunity. So let's stop pointing fingers and start reflecting inward. The real enemy is not across the border, it may be inside our own hearts. And until we fix that, no unity will last, no victory will come, and no peace will be real. My brothers and sisters, in a world that is increasingly shaped by illusions, distractions, and deception, we must learn to look not just at what is happening, but why it is happening. And when we look at Iran today, it's easy to reduce it to a geopolitical player, a rebellious state, or a stubborn regime. But if we truly reflect through the lens of the Qur'an and the Sunnah, a deeper question emerges. Could Iran's stance in today's world, isolated, defiant, under siege, be part of a divine plan? Could it be playing a role not in a political script, but in a spiritual unfolding that many are blind to? Let us be clear. Whether you agree with Iran's political model or not is beside the point. What we're discussing here is something far more significant than elections or policies. We're speaking about principle, about how, in an age of surrender, some still choose to stand. And that, my dear brothers and sisters, is a trait that the Quran consistently praises. Look around you. Look at the global stage. Most nations, especially those in the Muslim world, have bowed down to what we can only describe as a Dajjalic system. A system built on interest-based economies, media manipulation, spiritual erosion, and moral decay. A system that forces obedience to materialism and makes truth look outdated, makes modesty look oppressive, and makes faith look like extremism. And in the midst of all this, Iran has taken a path, not perfect, not pure, but defiant. Now remember what the Quran tells us in Surah Al-Kahf. A group of young men, the people of the cave, chose to withdraw from their society because everything around them had become corrupted. They were few, powerless, and mocked. But they had something the world had lost: conviction. And what did Allah do? He preserved their story in the Quran for eternity, not because of their success, but because of their stance. Similarly, in every era, Allah uses some to expose the reality of others. Some nations are tested with power. They sell out for comfort and alliances. Others are tested with isolation, yet they refuse to bow. Iran, whether you agree with it or not, has refused to kneel to the powers that have dominated this world through fear and control. And that refusal, that stance, is not meaningless. Of course, it would be naive to claim that Iran is flawless. No nation is. But the Quran teaches us that sometimes Allah uses imperfect people to play a perfect role. Consider the story of Abraha and his army that came to destroy the Kaaba. Allah didn't send a battalion of angels to fight. He used small birds carrying stones. The victory didn't come from military might. It came from Allah using the unexpected to achieve the inevitable. Today we must ask, what if Iran, despite its flaws, is being used as a symbolic barrier against the total submission of the Muslim world to Dajjalic forces? What if it's a spiritual check? A reminder that even when the world threatens to crush you, some still choose to stand. We often speak about the end times. We talk about the Mahdi, about Dajjal, about the army of truth versus the army of falsehood. But here's the critical point. That final battle doesn't start suddenly. The stage is being set now. The lines are being drawn now. And the Quran tells us that before truth triumphs, falsehood must expose itself completely. And before the Mahdi emerges, the world must be divided into those who submit to Allah and those who submit to power, wealth, and fear. So what does that have to do with Iran? Perhaps everything. Because when nearly every major Muslim government aligns with global powers that work to erase Islamic values, Iran stands largely outside that system. Not better, not holier, but different. It doesn't mean Iran is automatically on the side of truth, but it does mean that its position forces us to examine our own. Are we standing with those who submit to Allah or those who submit to worldly power? This question is not just for governments, it's for individuals like you and me. Because Dajjalic forces are not just political, they're psychological. They convince us to follow the herd, to fear losing